Do you want to look better, feel better, live a longer, healthier, and happier life? If you said no, you're either severely depressed and should speak to someone seriously, or you're just awesome and brimming with self confidence, in which case, go you. For everyone else, it comes down to choices. There's rarely enough time to focus exclusively on your health, fitness, diet, and so on, so it ends up as something that must be squeezed in around, well, life. This seems especially true from our mid 30s onwards, when it makes more of a difference. But what do you do with the limited time that you have? Hit the gym, go out for a walk or a run, or is playing sport enough? Or even better? That's the subject of today's video. Some of the things I'm going to cover may come as a major eye opener, and there are a couple of things that may seem shocking, but by the end of this video, you should have a better idea of what will work best for you and why. And we're starting right now. Most people see playing sports as a positive. After all, it's getting you off the couch, and depending on the activity, you'll often work up a sweat. And when you're feeling the effects the next day, you must have done something beneficial. But it's not usually a go to choice when someone feels they want to make a physical improvement. When you want to lose weight, build muscle, tone up, whatever that means, the usual response is to join a gym, hire a PT, go on a diet, go for a run, or something that involves discipline, sacrifice, and self torture. No pain, no gain, right? Sport's a fun thing, and there's no time for fun. There's a lot on at work, there are repairs to do at home, and if you don't get time for friends and family, what's the point of any of it? Then there are those who believe that their regular Friday night game of five-a-sides is brutal. Everyone says so in the pub afterwards, so that's clearly enough. Hitting the gym would be overkill. Clearly, these views lack a level of balance, but they are stances I have seen many people take over the years, so it's not like they're uncommon. However, one of the most common positions that ends up being adopted is worse than either of these extremes. Not doing anything. A study conducted by Public Health England showed that around 41% of adults aged 40 to 60 fail to engage in continuous physical activity, including walking, for more than 10 minutes each month. We all spend so much time sitting at desks, on couches, in cars, and so on, that the activity between these can be so little it doesn't even hit 10 minutes at a time. Data published in 2016 showed that 38% of all adults, that's over the age of 16, fail to meet the recommended minimum guidelines of 150 minutes of moderate activity or 75 minutes of vigorous activity per week in bouts of 10 minutes or more. Well, life is demanding. We're all busy. We've already established that. However, the same study showed that around the same number of people who failed to meet these criteria were likely to spend 6 or more hours during the week watching TV or in similarly sedentary activities like reading or playing computer games. Though I should point out, men were about 14% more guilty of this than women. Now keep in mind, these are minimum guidelines that are not being met. This isn't something to aspire to and then stop. This is the level below which you're opening yourself up to severe health risks. You substantially increase your chances of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer. Your risk of premature death increases by up to 30%, and your quality of life takes a hit regardless, increasing the likelihood of depression and anxiety, reduced cognitive function, and good judgment. I could go on, but the goal here is not to make you feel bad. However, with so many people in this category, it's estimated 5 million deaths per year could be avoided through increased exercise. That's more than double the global deaths from COVID in the whole of 2020. The thing that brought the whole world to a halt. I thought it might be worth mentioning. And when you work out that to meet these minimum guidelines, you need only get up and get moving for around 12 minutes twice each day, maybe that puts things in perspective a little. And if that had any kind of impact, then start with a tiny movement right now and hit the like button. Okay, so now more than ever you see the importance of getting movement in there. So what is the best option for you? If you've watched any of my other videos, and if not, thanks for getting on board with this one, you'll know I often have the answer of it depends. The answer is going to be different for everyone, but to help you make the best choice for you, let's consider a few things. As with anything health or fitness related, the best option is going to be the one that you will follow through on. For those in the camp I mentioned at the beginning who see physical improvement as something that should be torturous or self-sacrificing, you're unlikely to make anything stick this way. So even if your approach on paper is the most scientifically proven, optimal and effective route, if you don't stick to it, and why would you stick to something causing you discomfort, it will have no effect. You could own the greatest lawnmower in the world, but your grass will still look awful if you never take it out of the garage. Now, that may seem obvious, but it does come into play in quite a big way here, as we will see in a minute. Giving your effort to something you don't enjoy is called stress. And as I've covered in previous videos, and I'll do so in detail in a future video, stress is one of the greatest inhibitors of physical progress there is. Where giving your effort to something that brings you joy and happiness, that's called passion. So find your passion. We're more likely to stick with things that bring us joy and happiness. You'll have heard the phrase, happiness is inside you, or something similar. Well, that is 100% true. No matter what in this life you believe is making you happy, in reality your body is responding with the release of one or more feel-good hormones. And those hormones feel good. Without the release of these hormones, then that association of happiness, comfort, or joy does not exist. I'm not going to go into massive detail here, I can do that another time, but the 4 hormones of note are endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. The first two, endorphins and dopamine, are often considered selfish hormones, in that they're associated with activities that benefit us. The other two, serotonin and oxytocin, are more selfless chemicals produced in conjunction with increased connections, bonds, and the giving and receiving of love and respect. But they all have a role to play, and it's possible to form a strategic approach that will amplify your levels of each. Endorphins are the easy one to start with, a natural painkiller. This is the chemical that helps us push ourselves on when the going gets tough. It's how those who favour the self-torture approach keep going, in the short term at least. The feeling of runner's high, or the elation when you feel your muscles burning in pain at the end of a weightlifting workout. That's the work of endorphins, and it can become extremely addictive. So in isolation, this is not a great choice to focus on. Whilst this is probably more commonly associated with more traditional training techniques, high intensity cardio or intense gym sessions, it can form part of the appeal of certain sporting activities. Intense sports with fast, impactful changes of direction, or sudden bouts of exertion like squash, tennis, or some passages of play in team sports like football, rugby, ice hockey and the like, can all produce a release of this hormone and the lift that comes with it. Dopamine is the one we tend to crave the most and can be the most dangerous. Often referred to as the happy hormone, it's the one we usually feel is the most satisfying. Commonly it's achieved through ingestion of alcohol, nicotine, chocolate or other comfort foods, even things like cocaine. But we also receive dopamine hits when we use our mobile phones. Each time we receive a notification, reply to a text, or get a like on a post, we get a hit. Speaking of which, I'm totally jonesing for a hit right now. Could you do me a favour, and if you haven't already, just one hit of that like button? This can often be part of the avoidance of exercise. There are more hits to be gained from procrastinating on our phones, indulging in comfort foods, or shopping, though it's also a hormone that's released through achievement. So when we feel good about how we performed during a game, getting the W, or hitting a new PB in the gym, it is available to us. But for many, subconsciously, that's too risky. Because what if we don't win or hit new heights? Much safer to stay on our phones or hit the shops. Though as something else to remind yourself of here, the most extreme hits of dopamine usually come through others. Falling in love or having sex can cause your levels to skyrocket, and receiving praise for something you've done gives a major boost. And as we are such shallow creatures, most of the time, looking better and feeling more confident is only going to increase the chances of these things occurring in our lives. Serotonin is often cited as the feel-good hormone. It's a chemical we feel in conjunction with respect, admiration, trust, or preferential treatment. It boosts our confidence and it makes us feel on top of the world. It plays a key role in staving off anxiety and depression. So what can we do naturally to boost our serotonin, other than treating people well, doing our best when it affects others, and acting in a trustworthy manner? Well, spending time outdoors in daylight, getting a good night's sleep, and yes, exercise have all been shown to boost our serotonin levels. As for oxytocin, this is most commonly associated with emotional bonds and physical touch. Okay, I mentioned falling in love and sex as being associated with dopamine, but there it was more to do with the thrill. Oxytocin is more about the emotional bonds we develop, that warm fuzzy feeling you get being around certain people, even if you aren't doing anything thrilling or special. It can come through touch, with a hug or cuddling up on the couch. But we even get a hit of this chemical through simple gestures like a handshake, a fist bump, or a high five, things that frequently occur in sporting activities. So you can see there is a lot to be gained from exercise and activity in general, but despite these benefits, if your mindset is such that you're dreading going, you slog your way through things and you're only doing it because you have to, though keep in mind the person that has decided that is you, then these uplifts are unlikely to make an impact because you'll never fully commit to the workout or activity, and any return you do get from these hormonal releases will be drowned out by your own negativity. That's not to say you're being unfairly negative, it may be something worth reviewing, but the world would be a very boring place if we all liked the same things. Short of doing it to fit in with friends or colleagues, it's unlikely you consistently partake in sporting activity if you didn't enjoy it. So, this feeling of not liking it but suffering through it is more likely to be associated with a structured training plan of some kind. Whether that be a gym program, a fitness class, a boot camp, or following along with a fitness routine at home, often people put up with these things not because they enjoy it, but because they are so sick of where they are currently. They want to do something to get away from that feeling. And as mentioned earlier, this is what people do in these situations, so it must be done. It's the old logical fallacy, all cats have four legs, my dog has four legs, therefore my dog is a cat. In this case, I don't feel good about myself and I must do something about it. This is something, therefore I must do it. This is where playing sports can bring a noticeable advantage over a gym membership, because you're more likely to stick to something you enjoy, and with such a vast array of sporting activities available, there is more chance of finding an enjoyable pursuit. Plus, whilst both training and sporting activities are commonly associated with the release of endorphins and serotonin, discussed earlier, you're more likely to get your dopamine hits from the praise of others when you do well in a sporting environment, though this can occur in group training sessions too. And to complete the set, the bonds of teamwork or shared experiences, the handshakes, the fist bumps, the celebratory or even consolatory hugs, depending on the outcome of your sporting achievements, bring out those oxytocin kicks. In other words, there's more scope for feel-good circumstances within sport than other fitness options. And so it's more likely you will stick to consistent participation in a sporting activity than a gym-going routine. This has been proven as fact. An extensive study published in the BMJ Open in 2017, link below if you're interested, showed that playing sport in midlife was more strongly associated with still being active 20 years later compared with other activities, and this was even more likely to be true if the sporting activity had already been carried through from a younger age. In other words, people who play sports tend to stay active. Those who don't, but exercise or find activities in other ways, tend to stop. Meaning, even if a gym membership, cardio, or a fitness class was 1,000 times more beneficial, and sports participation has only a fraction of the benefits, if you're still doing it after 20 years, where you wouldn't be doing any of the others, there's no comparison. Okay, so it's beneficial because it's more likely to stick and encourage long-term activity. What else? Have you ever watched a movie centered around a sporting achievement? Rocky, Eddie the Eagle, Cool Runnings, Glory Road, A League of Their Own, The Karate Kid, or the incredibly underrated Warrior? Like all good movies, they all take you on a hero's journey, from frustration to hope, through adversity, and ultimately a feel-good finish. Not necessarily a victory. In fact, over half the movies I just mentioned, the protagonist doesn't win. But the journey is inspiring and uplifting. And if there's a training montage in there, and isn't there always, sometimes more than others, the hype is further amplified. I can't think of anything I've watched that has made me feel I am now inspired to go for a walk. And while some of these may have crossovers with general training inspiration, outside more niche movies like Pumping Iron or the general physique or transformations of the actors for the roles, very few movies are focused on general training because taking part in sport has more of an impact on your emotions. Wins and losses often bring highs and lows. The desire to win often overwhelms the discomfort from the effort involved. In the case of team sports, it's a communal experience, and your efforts have a direct effect on others, meaning you're less likely to give up. Plus, you can develop more than just your physique. You can develop trust, feelings of acceptance, and being part of a community. And with that comes elevated levels of self-esteem. You can develop the strategic part of your mind that could be beneficial in other parts of your life. And it's a safer environment to practice dealing with failure, because everyone within that sporting community will have to deal with that at some point. No one wins 100% of the time. Now, you could argue that these things are all available in general purpose training. You can get that community feel in a fitness class or a boot camp, but there, if you give up, they can keep going. And whilst the crowd may encourage you to continue, you're not actively hampering others if you don't. You can fail in the gym, a missed lift, failure to hit a timed distance on the rowing machine or whatever, but then you're left beating yourself up much of the time. Unless you're working with a coach or a training partner, that may not be so much of a learning experience as it is a setback or a discouragement. I'm not suggesting for a minute that exercise and formal training techniques are subpar choices, just that many of the benefits are shared with participation in sporting activities. Bone strengthening, clearing out of bad cholesterol, decreased risk of stroke, high blood pressure, diabetes, etc., a stronger immune system, and an improved cardiorespiratory system. These are all benefits you can associate to varying degrees in either choice. But the point worth reiterating is, if you can achieve these benefits on both sides, then the one you're more likely to stick with is clearly going to have more impact. Unless you follow through on something, it can't deliver on its positive effects. But there are disparities that make a blind binary view dangerous. Playing sport as your only method of improvement is likely to bring new problems for you to deal with. Most commonly is the likelihood of injury. Being generally active is going to reduce your chances of injury in everyday life because your body is more prepared for movement. But in sport, where the drive to win can help motivate you despite the discomfort you might be feeling, it can also cause you to overstretch the capabilities of your body. When I had my gym, if someone joined and told me they regularly played football, I was immediately waiting to see how long it would be before they couldn't come in due to a hamstring pull, a strained calf muscle, or some other damage. The shifts in pace, unexpected changes in direction, or the passionate challenges of your opponents are all risk factors that are difficult to manage without hampering your contribution to the game. Though, even in more predictable disciplines, there are risks. If you're a runner or a cyclist, there are the elements to contend with: loose ground, ice, spillages, etc. But the problem here is, you're training your body to become good or exceptional at specific movements. In the case of running, propelling your body forwards. There's little lateral movement and no real requirement for upper body strength. The result? The development of imbalances favouring those movements, but likely increasing the chances of injury due to unstable joints when challenged from another direction outside the sport. This is why top athletes in any sport don't just practice sport-specific movements. They spend often equal time working on keeping their body in balance, developing strength, mobility, and mind-muscle connection in the gym or with a specialised trainer. But they can afford to do this. It's their job. But what about those who have a regular job and simply want to look after themselves with limited time available? The point of all of this is to show that there are benefits to both. If heading to the gym or going on a restrictive diet is something you're doing to achieve a change, yet the process feels like self-torture, then take a minute to think it through. Is there something you could do that you would enjoy? You may feel that getting that toned physique or sculpting a six-pack is the result of work in the gym, but the reality is, any activity that lifts your energy, improves your health, and increases your lung capacity is going to cross over into the rest of your life. Better lung capacity means improved oxygen flow to your body. That leads to improved brain function and less fatigue, so you get more done. Perhaps that alone will free up further time to focus on self-improvement, and it will certainly contribute to an increased caloric output from everyday life. The boost from those feel-good hormones we discussed is going to create a shift to a happier life in general, not just for you, but everyone who interacts with you. And it's been proven that playing sport is something people tend to stick with for longer, even if on its own it will not get you to where you want to go. It is a start to the process. Once your general fitness improves from the increased activity, and you start to benefit from the increased mood and metabolic shifts, you may find your feelings shift naturally. As you become more invested in the sport, you're likely to be more careful about what you eat, not wanting to feel bloated or sick during the game, or just feeling better about yourself, so not requiring the comfort food or drink. And from there, the addition of more focused training may happen with little or no internal resistance, and you'll be better primed to get more out of your efforts. On the flip side, though, for those who use the argument that they play sports weekly so they don't need to do anything else, whilst you may get away with that in your younger years, the more you age, the more those imbalances I mentioned are likely to kick in, the more prone to injury you become, and the slower your recovery is likely to be. So, wherever possible, ensuring there is some element of focus on imbalances, posture, strengthening weak points, and so on is always going to be a good idea. If you get your joy and enthusiasm from training alone, maybe you're not particularly competitive and wouldn't feel at home in a sporting environment, then great. I'm not saying you should rush out and take up a sport tomorrow. What I am saying is self improvement is supposed to be about increasing self confidence, improving self image, and generally feeling better. So, if what you're doing is making you feel miserable, it's not going to last. And then you're likely to feel even worse for failing in what you set out to do. Rather than forcing yourself down a path you're not comfortable following, take a step back and review your options. There is always more than one route to any destination, so choose wisely. But if on review you feel participation in a sport is not for you and hitting the gym is something you still feel uncomfortable about, then click here to see if working with a physiotherapist or a sports therapist, even if you're not injured, might be worth considering. Alternatively, stay tuned and consider hitting subscribe for future videos where I'll be discussing further options you may find interesting.